This is Solo Leveling Manhwa vs. the anime, Episode 2. Episode 2 of Solo Leveling began where Episode 1 left off, halfway through Chapter 4. When they realize who the god is, the manhwa shows the god statue in a full shot panel, but it's just the face in the anime. The manhwa plays this part more ominously and frightening than the anime, mainly because this is the starting of an episode but the ending of a chapter, so it's fine. Chapter 4 ends and Chapter 5 starts with Sung Jin-woo saying a bit about himself and the lore of the world. But an anime-only narrator takes the place of this point instead, and the opening of Solo Leveling plays for the first time, which I think is insanely accurate, very Korean-like for the anime/manhwa. It's amazingly animated, so you can tell a lot of effort was put into it. It also showcases the fight between Sung Ji-woo and Igris, because if there's one thing A1 Pictures knows how to do, is smashing it with music. After the opening, the anime cuts away to Sung Jin-woo's little sister's Jina's classroom, where she's talking to that girl I mentioned in the episode 1 version of this video, Hang Sung-yi, that's her name, I remembered. More like I went back and checked. She was asking about Jina's brother Sung Jin-woo being a hunter, foreshadowing the Snowland dungeon arc. And now the anime cuts back to the dungeon, but the manhwa of this point has more scenes compared to the anime. It shows Sung Jin-woo asking about the leader Sung's bleeding. It shows the leader regretting that he didn't bring more power and resources because he thought the dungeon would be easy. It talks about that one guy that was just vaporized without a trace. It shows one guy shocked to uselessness. It shows Juhi being completely useless. It shows how people are panicking. The anime doesn't have any of this. Why they're not there beats me. But Sung Jin-woo also talks about how difficult it'd be to escape because that god statue is also in the way. Now the manhwa and anime aligns on this guy who's trying to use his super speed to escape the room. He's very confident in his speed and he is really fast. In fact, he can move so fast that even his legs were left behind. Sorry. Well, after this, Sung Jin-woo said a certain word. But understandably, A1 Pictures didn't want to do that. Anyway, the way Sung Jin-woo figured out what the room was all about was way more intense and interesting compared to its anime counterparts, where he mostly remained calm. His test for the first commandment was way more intensive in the manhwa than the anime. But what I would say is the biggest change in this point is the camera placement on the bowing scene. The manhwa shows this scene from behind, which has given rise to many memes on the internet. But the anime, however, shows this scene from the front, which just doesn't carry the same impact. The manhwa depiction of this scene was handled much better and is more terrifying as a result. In fact, most of the dungeon room incident of the manhwa is scarier, intensifying, and all-round superior to the anime version. But that is the difference between watching and reading. Some things would need to be different. The reason might not be immediately apparent. And even though the visual anime version has differences that are inferior to the source, the fact that anime has the option of background music that can sell into any situation more than likely makes up for those changes. But if you didn't recently read the manhwa, you also more than likely wouldn't notice much differences at all. As the god statue started walking toward them, this praising guy that walks up said he was conducting research on traditional folklore and as such knows how to praise God, while in the manhwa he said he was part of the church choir and as such knows how to praise God. But still, he ended up praising the god in heaven instead of the statue god and was immediately squashed. Chapter 6 ends. Everything from this point plays out the same in both versions, and also Juhi was being as useless in the anime as she is in the manhwa. I'm just gonna say it now. She's worse than Sakura. Before Sung Jin-woo barely crawled his way to the statue, he did a short and desperate prayer to God. But I have to give the anime the win for this chase scene. It was intensifying and the music played a huge part to that. After the chase, Juhi ran over to Sung Jin-woo and tearfully mentioned his lost leg, while in the manhwa he said it himself. Chapter 7 ends. It's time for the next commandment and the god statue is seated in the anime, but is still standing in the manhwa. It was also remarked that 17 of them started this but only 6 are left. Right after this, the altar appeared and Mr. Kim pulls out a sword from mid-air using his skill, but pulls out the blade normally in the anime. When they stood at the altar, the anime cuts to Sung Jin-woo's sisters Jina visiting their mother in the hospital. Then it cuts back to the altar. Everything plays out the same and Chapter 8 ends. Chapter 9 begins and mostly plays out the same as the anime as well. Chapter 10 begins, and almost immediately after it does, the leader tells Juhi to take Sung Jin-woo and run through the open doors so they can escape. And what we saw is her being completely useless in the anime as she is in the manhwa. I'm gonna say it again. She's worse than Sakura, but then again this is due to tiredness, so I suppose she gets a pass. Everything else is the same, but when Sung Jin-woo was left alone at the altar, his own flame is in front of him, but in the anime it's behind him, making his torture scene late, but it remains bluish dark in the anime. And the anime version of this scene is far more despair inducing because it does go on for much longer, and he even lost an arm. Whereas in the manhwa he was just impaled by one attack and dropped on the altar. The anime was far more sad and gruesome. I guess now I know why some things were cut from the beginning of the episode. They wanted to keep more time for this scene. The administrator message that opens up to him looks more page-like in the manhwa and looks more window-like in the anime. As he accepts, the anime ends and plays the ending theme for the first time, while the manhwa shows the start of his evolution, bright enough to light up the entire room, and chapter 10 ends. Thank you all so very much for watching, and I'll see you in episode 3.